The email came while I was grilling ribs for our anniversary. Subject line: termination effective immediately. Name's Ellery Claiborne, 58, ex-plant manager, still wearing my badge when I flipped that last burger. Ever been fired with barbecue sauce on your hands? Yeah, tell me your worst timing story. I didn't mean to open the cedar chest that morning, but maybe it had been waiting for me. It had been years since I last ventured into the attic, and honestly, I wasn't even supposed to be up there now. A minor leak near the eastern eave had soaked 2 ceiling tiles and left a faint watermark on the hallway drywall. I'd called the roofer twice, no answer yet. So on that humid spring Saturday, with the scent of wet wood and old insulation still clinging to the air, I decided to take a look myself. The attic greeted me with its usual silence, not the eerie kind, just the sort that only comes with insulation and time. Light filtered through the dusty vents, casting slow-moving beams over cardboard boxes and forgotten holiday decor. And there in the corner beneath a faded Christmas wreath sat the cedar chest, still closed, still intact, still exhaling lavender. I hesitated before walking toward it, my fingers brushing the top, familiar with its grooves. Naya had loved this thing. Cedar smells like memory, she used to say. I never quite understood what she meant until years after she passed, when memory became the only thing I had left of her. The lid creaked as I opened it, slow and respectful, like waking something that had been sleeping too long. Dust rose in a gentle cloud. Inside, carefully folded in tissue and plastic wrap, was the dress. Naya's graduation dress, navy with tiny embroidered flowers and a sweetheart neckline that had always made her laugh when she saw it in photos. Too grown up for a 17-year-old, she'd say. I remembered the photo of her in it, standing under the tall pines in her parents' yard, chin-lifted lipstick too bright, pride radiant. I hadn't known the dress was still here. Or maybe I did, somewhere in that dusty attic of my mind. My hands, slower than they used to be, lifted it gently, letting the fabric unfold in the filtered light. It smelled faintly of cedar and something floral, jasmine maybe. The lace at the sleeve brushed against my wrist, fragile but intact. That's when I saw the card. It was tucked between the layers, nestled near the neckline, as if waiting to be found. I recognized the handwriting immediately, Naya's looping script, the R always curling up just a bit too high. Let Maris wear this when she needs courage. I stood there, the attic suddenly quieter than before. The words felt heavier than the dress itself. Downstairs, I could hear the clink of plates. Maris was probably raiding the fridge again. She was 17 now, same age as Naya when she wore the dress, but so different, bold, loud, with earbuds permanently in and opinions sharper than the kitchen knives. Still the card: when she needs courage. Not when she's older, not if she wants it. Naya had always believed that clothes carried stories, and some stories were meant to be passed down. I carried the dress downstairs and laid it gently on the guest room bed, smoothing the folds with the flat of my palm. The lace caught slightly on my thumb. I should probably mend that. My fingers lingered there longer than they needed to. Would Maris laugh? That was the question circling in my head like a moth. She had no patience for nostalgia. She'd once called my record player an antique that can't connect to Bluetooth. She didn't mean to be cruel, but she was modern in a way I wasn't ready for. Still, I stood there staring at the navy folds and the whisper of a memory stitched into its seams. I'll show her tonight, I said aloud, surprising myself with the decision. The floorboards creaked as I stepped out of the room, a slow exhale filling my lungs. A knock at the front door snapped me back. Laughter floated in, high, unfiltered, full of that teenage confidence I once mistook for recklessness. Maris was home, and she wasn't alone. Maris laughed. Dad, you're not serious. This is vintage clowncore. The word hit the room like a rubber band snapping across skin, meant to be playful, but with just enough sting to leave a mark. I stood in the doorway, holding the dress like it was something sacred, something I should have wrapped in tissue again, instead of presenting like a birthday cake no one wanted. The navy fabric drooped between my hands, a limp banner of hope. The living room was flooded with late afternoon sunlight, slanting gold across the hardwood floors. Maris sat cross-legged on the couch, one AirPod out, the other dangling. Her phone rested on the coffee table, still blasting synth-heavy pop through a tinny speaker. Jess and Talia, her friends from school, were sprawled across the love seat, each with iced coffee in hand. Oversized sweatshirts and sharp eyeliner that made them look older than they were. I just thought, I started voice trailing. Wait, Jess interrupted, raising her phone. Hold it up again. I need a photo. I froze. Talia whispered something behind her cup, mouthing EW, before hiding a smirk with a long sip. Maris gave me a look, half pity, half amusement, then turned back to her friends, rolling her eyes, just enough for me to catch. It's like a Pinterest horror board, she said, grinning. We could do a TikTok, like dressing in my dead mom's 80s nightmares. The room spun slowly, not from anger, but from that kind of dizzy disappointment that sneaks up on you when you realize you've misjudged your own child. I wasn't mad at her. I was mad at myself for imagining, even briefly, that she might see what I saw in the dress, what Naya saw. I folded the dress quietly and walked back to the hallway. My footsteps barely made a sound on the wood floor, but inside every step echoed. Later that night, I passed by her room on my way to the laundry. The door was slightly ajar. I stopped when I heard her voice, high-pitched, mock-serious. "This is the ultimate prom sleigh, y'all," she said to her phone's camera, twirling with the dress half-zipped, the sleeves hanging like wilted wings. Her friends' comments came in fast laughing emojis, skulls, the word iconic used ironically. She laughed too, the kind of laugh that fills a room but empties meaning. I watched from the hallway, the laundry basket pressing into my hip, and for a moment I wasn't in my house anymore. I was back in the pine trees with Naya, watching her turn, in that same dress, grinning because it made her feel brave. I didn't say anything, just kept walking. An hour later, I found the dress on her floor, half off the hanger, the hem crumpled, one sleeve twisted. The card, the one with Naya's note, was still tucked in the lining, unread. I didn't pick it up. Instead, I went to my laptop. Earlier that day, I had opened a browser tab to a site that sold custom display cases. Shadow boxes, they called them. You could add dried flowers, letters, fabric swatches, a little museum of memory behind glass. I had been ready to measure the dress, to order a box to preserve the story. Now I stared at the tab. The dress, the note, the gesture, all of it felt small, outdated, foolish even. I clicked the small gray X at the top of the browser and watched the page vanish. Behind me, the faint thump of music started again from Maris's room, a pop song I didn't recognize, full of bass drops and half-spoken lyrics. I didn't try to place it. I watched your wife hem that dress with more love than I've seen in any church vow. Rutha said, her fingers trailing over the faded gingham tablecloth, as if touching a memory. The air inside the church's multi-purpose hall smelled of powdered lemonade and mothballs. Folding tables groaned under the weight of yellowing cookbooks, chipped Tupperware, and porcelain angels with cracked wings. Outside, spring rain tapped gently on the aluminum roof, and the wet scent of pine drifted in through the open side door. I hadn't meant to come. I'd only stopped by to drop off a box of old extension cords and a pair of Maris's rollerblades she hadn't touched since middle school. But there, among a stack of yearbooks and hymnals, stood Rutha May Lockett, hair piled high like a southern auntie, headed to revival, gold hoop earrings shimmering like halos in the fluorescent light. She turned just as I was trying to escape unnoticed. "Well, if it ain't Mr. Ellery Page," she said, her voice rough like burlap, but warm as cornbread. "Still wearing that same sad face from graduation day." I chuckled despite myself. "You remember that, baby. I remember everything. Especially that red dress your Naya wore like she invented color." My hand involuntarily went to the plastic grocery bag I was carrying. Inside, folded with reverence, was the dress. Though I didn't know why I'd brought it, Maris didn't want it, I said, not quite able to meet her eyes. Rutha tilted her head, studying me. "Did you think she would?" I thought. I stopped. What had I thought? That some mystical connection would spark when Maris touched the fabric. That legacy could jump a generation without friction. She stepped closer and nodded toward the bag. "Can I?" I opened it, and she reached in delicately, as if unwrapping a relic. She unfolded the dress, running a knuckle across the stitching like a jeweler examining a rare stone. I watched her sew this. Her voice softened. We were both 19, bored out of our minds in Mrs. Hanley's home ec. Your Naya brought in her mama's fabric and said, "I'm making this for the day I finally leave this town." And she did. Wore it with that red lipstick that made every boy dumb. A tremor moved through me. I could see it again, Naya on the front porch, the late May light turning her skin golden lipstick. Perfect, even though it was smudged by lemonade sips. My chest tightened the way it always did when a memory caught me off guard. A dull, familiar ache behind the ribs. Rutha folded the dress again with care and slid it back into the bag. "There's a project I'm helping with," she said, digging into her oversized purse. "They call it Revive South. TV folks community funded. They're collecting stories about old Southern designs, textiles, dresses, quilts, not fashion honey heritage." She handed me a flyer folded into eighths. The ink had smudged from moisture, but the tagline was still legible. "Revive South, stitching stories of the past." I scanned the sheet. A contact number, a submission deadline. A blurry photo of a smiling woman beside a spinning wheel. "They looking for stories, not perfection," she said. "And that dress, it's a story stitched in thread." I wouldn't know where to start, I admitted. "You already started," she said, pointing at my chest. "You carried it here." We stood there in silence for a moment as a breeze stirred the edge of the flyer in my hand. Rutha took a sip of her lemonade. The styrofoam cup creaked in her grip, and then leaned in close. "Listen, that girl of yours might not wear the dress now, but one day she'll dig through her own attic. And if she finds it folded clean with a note and a story attached, she'll know who she came from. And maybe even where she's going." Her words landed like stitches, tightening in fabric, slow, firm, permanent. When I got home that afternoon, the sky had darkened slightly. A gray hush hung over the street, like the pause between verses of a hymn. I left the dress on the passenger seat while I unlocked the front door, and only when I turned back to retrieve it did I notice something I'd forgotten. The tag. It was fraying at the edges but still readable, Naya Spring 1985. I carried it inside, not to the closet or the cedar chest, but straight to the sewing room I hadn't opened in 2 years. The doorknob felt cold and unfamiliar. When I pushed it open, dust shimmered in the slant of light. Everything was just as she'd left it, the old Singer machine tucked under its floral cover, the tomato-shaped pincushion dotted with pins, and the tiny sewing scissors she'd used like a surgeon. I sat down, opened the drawer, pulled out the old thimble still warm somehow, and set it next to the folded dress. For the first time in years, I didn't flinch. The sewing machine sputtered, then whirred, like it remembered her hands before mine. It had sat in the back of our hall closet for 2 years, next to an old humidifier and a bag of Maris's ballet slippers. The last time it was used, Naya had been repairing a hem on her choir skirt. The memory felt brittle, like newsprint left too long in the sun. I cleared the kitchen table and laid out the tools. Fabric scissors, thread spools, a needle cushion shaped like a tomato, its red faded pink from time. I unfolded the dress with a reverence I hadn't known I still carried. The lace caught in the overhead light. It was more delicate than I remembered. I spent the first night doing nothing but watching videos, tutorials of people far more nimble than I, their hands steady, voices calm. Running stitch, one woman explained with a Georgia lilt, just a whisper through the fabric, in and out. On the second night I tried it myself. My fingers fumbled. The thread looped. The hem puckered like a scowl. I cursed under my breath, pricked my thumb, and kept going. Not out of confidence, out of something else. I didn't have a name for it. Outside, the neighborhood dimmed into night. Lawn sprinklers clicked. A moth thumped softly against the window pane. I kept the lights low, the overhead fan spinning, slow humming like a song I couldn't quite place. Around midnight, I took a break. Reheated some mac and cheese. As it spun in the microwave, I scrolled my phone mostly out of habit. That's when I saw it. Maris's TikTok one I hadn't known about. The video had already gained traction. In it, she held the dress up and mimicked a southern drawl, "Y'all, my dad thinks I'll wear this to GradFest. Bless his nostalgic little heart." The caption read, "Clown core, but make it trauma." In the background, I could see our hallway, my home. The comments came in waves. Laugh emojis. "Is that thing haunted?" one asked. "Tell him to donate it to the Smithsonian of Sadness," another joked. I sat down slowly as if my body were made of glass. I didn't say anything to her. She was already asleep, probably. I didn't cry. I just reopened the laptop and downloaded every file I needed. I spent the next few nights sewing silently. I repaired the hem. I reinforced the seams with care. I added a soft lining pale cream, like the magnolia blooms in our backyard. The bruises on my fingers deepened. I welcomed them. On the fifth night, I filmed a 30-second clip. No face, no narration, just my hands at work. Thread passing through fabric. A flash of Naya's photo in the corner taken in 1980 beside the pine trees. Her lipstick was bold, her smile bolder. I attached the file to an email addressed to the Revive South program. I didn't write anything in the message. No explanation, no signature. I just hit send. The next morning, I made coffee. Instant, bitter. I sat by the window and stared out into the garden. The azaleas had started to bloom. Pink like the cushion, like her lipstick. An email pinged around 10:03 a.m. Submission received. You will be notified upon airing. I closed the lid and exhaled. That afternoon, Maris waltzed in phone, in hand grinning. Dad, she said, I think I'm going to wear something wild to GradFest. Maybe go viral again. I smiled soft. I'm sure you will. She didn't notice the dress had vanished from her floor. She didn't ask about the sewing kit, and I didn't offer. Some stories stitched themselves quietly. I wrapped the dress in brown paper and wrote no return address. There was something final in the way the paper folded over itself, something ceremonial about the crisscross of packaging tape. Like sealing up a prayer you didn't quite believe in, but sent anyway. I'd finished it the night before, pressed each pleat flat, trimmed the errant threads, ironed down the collar until it held its old poise. At the last minute, I stitched a small tag into the lining. Cream cotton soft lettering, Naya 1985. Maris 2018. I didn't ask anyone if it was a good idea. I just did it. The video had gone out the week before. This was just the physical accompaniment, the tangible proof, the object that might mean something to someone else someday. I slid the dress into a cardboard box lined with tissue I found in the pantry, still scented faintly with lavender. On top, I placed the old photo Naya by the pines, bright lipstick hands on hips. I didn't write a note. There was nothing left to say that the fabric hadn't whispered already. By the time I drove to the post office, the sky had begun to bruise. Clouds gathered like secrets over Albany's flat streets. The scent of ozone clung to the air thick and electric. I parked under a flickering street lamp and sat for a moment, engine ticking in the silence. Inside, the clerk barely looked up as he slid the box over the counter. Overnight, he asked, thumbing a roll of stickers. Standard's fine, I said. No rush, just care. He nodded once, affixed a barcode. I watched it disappear behind the blue swing door and felt lighter and heavier at the same time. In the car, my phone buzzed. Rutha, you ready to be on TV, Mystery Man? She asked. I could hear wind chimes in the background. I'll watch it with the blinds down, I said. You're no fun, she teased. Naya would have thrown a party. She always did like spectacle. She liked meaning. Big difference. There was a long pause, the kind that usually meant we were both smiling at something too fragile to name. She said, you did good, Ellery. Really good. After we hung up, I didn't start the car. I sat there listening to the rumble of thunder in the distance, watching the empty street breathe in shadows. When I got home, Maris was in the living room with her laptop open. A slideshow paused mid-frame. I'm doing this thing for GradFest, she said without looking up. Funny family fashion fails. Jess says I should include that dress moment. She laughed casually, the kind of laugh that didn't know what it was stepping on. I just nodded. She didn't see the box was gone. She didn't ask why the sewing machine was unplugged, covered again, resting. Later that night, I received the email. Program confirmed, Revive South air date, June 3rd, 8 p.m., Channel 14. The same hour as Maris's GradFest. I stared at the screen for a long time, then closed the laptop slowly, as though any sudden motion might make the words vanish. I didn't feel triumphant, just quiet. The irony settled in like dusk. Two lives running parallel hers in a room of neon and noise mine, on public access television, quietly stitched together with lace and history. I didn't tell her. I didn't plan to watch. Instead, on the night it aired, I went for a walk. The streets were wet from a quick summer shower. I carried a small umbrella I didn't open. The air smelled of rain on concrete and the last blooms of honeysuckle. My loafers soaked through by the time I reached the park. Somewhere far away, a TV glowed with the image of my hands sewing in silence. Somewhere else, Maris stood at a podium cracking jokes over a slideshow of out-of-context memories. I walked past the swings where she'd once called me her best friend, past the bench where Naya used to read aloud while Maris made daisy chains, past the tree with initials carved too shallow to last. A breeze passed through the branches. The leaves responded in kind. Back home, I brewed tea the chamomile kind Naya used to love. I sat on the porch in the dark, the porch light off the sky faintly orange behind the clouds. Inside, my phone buzzed. Probably someone from church. I didn't check. Some nights aren't meant for sharing, just for remembering. The next morning, the kettle whistled at 6:45 like always. Habit wins even when sleep doesn't. I made 2 mugs out of instinct, one plain black one with milk and too much sugar. Only after I set them both down did I remember. I drank from both. Maris had left early for school. A post-it note on the fridge. Don't forget dog food. We didn't have a dog. I found myself standing in the doorway of her room. The dress was no longer on the floor, and the pile of laundry had shifted to reveal a box of old photo prints, ones I hadn't seen in years. There was one of her in kindergarten, face painted like a tiger. One of Naya holding her on a hay bale, autumn light slicing across both their faces. A few loose negatives fell between the bed and wall when I tried to lift the envelope. I let them fall. Downstairs, I opened my email again. No new messages. I scrolled back through the submission thread, rereading words I'd already memorized. There was something calming in the repetition, the way we reread old recipes or familiar poems. In one of the attachments, a still from the final clip I'd sent, just my hand centered. The dress spread flat. In the corner of the frame, the hem glowed under the lamp's warm light. The tag was just visible. Naya 1985, Maris 2018. I stared at it longer than I should have. Then I closed the laptop and finally let it go. The rain returned mid-morning, tapping the windows like a gentle reminder. I brewed another cup of tea, sat with it, waited. Some moments deserve silence. Some love, too, is best shown with a stitch and no return address. The gym smelled like hairspray and cafeteria pizza, a sharp combination that clung to the summer sweat rising from the bodies packed into the bleachers. The fans above barely stirred the air. On stage, Maris adjusted the mic and cleared her throat, her fingers fidgeting with the remote clicker. "Okay," she said into the mic, flashing a smile. "Let's lighten things up." Behind her, the projector came to life first, showing a grainy clip from her TikTok archives. Laughter rolled through the room. She flipped to a slide of her and her friends imitating retro prom poses, then another where she wore that infamous 80s dress, half-zipped, lip-syncing into a hairbrush. "Y'all," she giggled, "my dad thought this would look good on me. It's giving vintage clowncore." The audience burst out laughing. Even a few teachers chuckled. Maris beamed, enjoying the spotlight. Then, without warning, the screen went black. There was a beat of confusion, murmurs shifting in seats, someone tapping their phone to check the Wi-Fi. And then the image returned. But not her slideshow. Across the screen, elegant white text on a black background, "Revive South presents the Claiborne dress." The gym fell silent. Soft piano music played. A new video began. No flashy transitions, no filters. Just a pair of hands, older and careful, stitching along a familiar seam. A voice began, calm and reverent. This dress held more than fabric. It held the woman I loved and the child she left me. Maris froze. The hands on screen belonged to her father. There was no mistaking the way his thumb bore the slight crook from an old break, or the shape of his wedding ring now strung around a chain. Her throat went dry. Gasps moved like a wave through the crowd. A teacher's hand covered her mouth. Then a photo appeared, her mother Naya standing in front of pine trees, wearing the dress with bright red lipstick, and joy spread across her face. The video faded to another image Maris as a baby, gurgling in a nearly identical version of the dress cheeks, full eyes wide. She heard a sharp intake of breath, her own. Maris dropped the remote. The sound echoed. She bolted from the stage, her shoes slipping on the polished gym floor, pushing past the stunned faces into the hallway. Behind her, the video continued playing, her father's voice now, quieter, more reflective. It's not just fabric. It's story. It's memory. It's love that endures beyond laughter, beyond loss. In the hallway, the fluorescent lights buzzed above her like judgment. Her breathing was ragged, heart-hammering. Down the corridor, leaning against a row of lockers, stood Ellery. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched her go. He looked tired, but there was something different in his eyes. Not pride, not shame, peace. She turned the corner before he could see the tears welling. Back home, Maris slammed the door behind her and sprinted upstairs. In her closet, beneath a stack of beach towels, she found it, the dress, perfectly pressed, lined the hem, newly stitched. And on top of it, a small folded card. She hadn't noticed it before. Her hands trembled as she opened it. In her mother's handwriting, still graceful after all these years. Let Maris wear this when she needs courage. Courage. Maris sank to the carpet, the note clutched against her chest. Her mind raced to her father's quiet footsteps, his evening silences, his calloused fingers, the sewing machine, whirring late at night. How many nights had he sat alone at the kitchen table, trying to bring a piece of her mother back to life? Her fingers brushed the hem again, and she saw now the label stitched inside. Naya 1985, Maris 2018. A single tear hit the dress, then another. She stood slowly, walked to her desk, and opened her phone. No unread texts. She tapped out a message, fingers hovering longer than they should have. Can we talk? She hit send. Downstairs, the house was quiet, but something had shifted, like the air after a storm, charged with something new. Hope, maybe, or the start of it. Meanwhile, in the gym, the video had ended. Silence lingered, then tentative applause. A few students clapped slowly, then more joined in, hesitant, respectful. A teacher wiped at her eyes. Another whispered, "I didn't know that was her dad." The projection faded back to the school's slide template, awkward and unfinished. Jess, one of Maris's friends, stared at the screen, then at the door Maris had run through. "We didn't know," she murmured. Talia just swallowed hard and put her phone away. Outside, Ellery had stepped into the humid night air. The cicadas had begun their evening chorus, droning like a far-off engine. He sat on the bench beneath the school's flagpole and let the evening unfold. In his pocket, the phone buzzed once. He didn't look immediately. Instead, he stared up at the stars, just beginning to appear one by one behind thinning clouds. Then he opened the message. 3 words. He closed his eyes and smiled. Maris came to breakfast without makeup, her hair pulled into a sleep-wrinkled bun, the dress folded over one arm like it might break. She stood at the edge of the kitchen where the scent of slightly burnt pancakes curled around the room like a hesitant question. Ellery looked up from the skillet. "You're up early," she said nothing, just held out the dress. He took it carefully, fingers brushing the hem, and placed it over the back of a chair. "I'm sorry," she said finally, "for laughing, for all of it." He nodded, not rushing to fill the silence. He flipped a pancake, letting the moment settle. Maris sat. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but she wasn't crying. "Why didn't you tell me about the card? I thought you wouldn't want it," he said. "I almost didn't give it to you at all." She picked at a crack in the table's varnish. "I didn't, not then. I didn't see it, any of it." From the counter, Ellery pulled a napkin-wrapped envelope. Inside was the card, her mother's handwriting, now more precious than any text or trend. He slid it to her. Read it again, slower this time. Maris unfolded the card. "Let Maris wear this when she needs courage." She read it aloud this time, voice soft. They ate in quiet. Pancakes cooled quickly, syrup thickening at the bottle's lip. Somewhere outside, a lawnmower hummed into Action Summer's background music. Ellery's phone buzzed. A voicemail. He tapped speaker. "Mr. Claiborne, this is Rutha. You better answer next time they want to follow up. Your story's touched folks. Call me." Maris grinned faintly. "She sounds terrifying." "She is, in the best way." He smirked, the corners of his mouth creasing. She also bakes a pecan pie that can fix marriages. Maris tilted her head. They want you on TV again. They want us. He looked at her meaningfully. But only if you want to. She paused, then nodded. Let's do something with this. Not just a segment. Something real. He raised an eyebrow. A fund, she said. For girls who want to sew. Or create. Like Mom did. Not every girl gets that chance. Ellery blinked. The idea was so her big-hearted and just a little impractical. What would we call it? The Nia Claiborne Thread Project, she said, without hesitation. That afternoon, they opened the bottom drawer of Nia's old sewing cabinet. Dust bloomed with the movement. Inside paisley remnants, a faded measuring tape, buttons of every size and shimmer. Maris picked up a fabric swatch, held it to the light. She labeled them. Ellery nodded. She cataloged everything, said memory lived in material. Together they sorted through the drawer. Whispered stories surfaced. Nia's voice echoed between the folds, not as sound, but as presence. 2 days later, they sat side by side in a tiny local radio booth. Ellery adjusted the mic. We're starting a foundation in memory of my wife, Nia Claiborne, a woman who stitched more than dresses. She stitched legacy, Maris added. If you've ever loved someone who created beauty from scraps, this is for them. They left the station holding hands. Her pinky looped through his like when she was 5. That evening, a notification pinged. One donation, $17.36, from a name Ellery barely remembered, Jess T. He showed it to Maris. She smiled. Guess someone else got the message. He nodded. Just the first stitch. They returned to the kitchen. The old sewing machine waited patiently on the table, humming faintly, as if remembering where it left off. Together they threaded the needle. Later that night, Ellery stood in the kitchen alone. The machine sat idle now, but its presence had changed. It wasn't just a machine anymore. It was a thread between generations. He poured a glass of water, sipping slowly, listening to the quiet creaks of the house. There was a note on the fridge. Maris had written it. Don't toss the paisley, I want to make a headband. Also teach me how to hem straight. He smiled, folded the note, and tucked it into his pocket. He walked to Nia's old closet, opened the door, and didn't flinch this time. Inside, the scent of lavender still lingered. One of her scarves hung loosely on a hook. He touched it. Tomorrow, he whispered, not sure if he was speaking to her or to himself. He returned to the sewing cabinet, pulled out a soft blue fabric, the one Nia had used to make Maris's baby quilt. He sat, turned on the desk lamp, and began to cut. Outside, the cicadas chirped in steady rhythm. Inside, a father began again, one careful stitch at a time. 1 year later, I watched my daughter walk across the same stage, but this time in a dress she made with her own hands. It shimmered in the overhead lights of Albany High's gymnasium. Not flashy, not loud, just honest. Fitted bodice, soft navy panels, and a touch of lace from Nia's archived box, subtle on the sleeves. Maris moved like she owned the fabric, not the other way around. The gym had been transformed. Gone were the bleachers and basketball markings. In their place, hand-sewn quilt squares hung on every wall, each crafted by a girl from the Nia Claiborne Thread Project. Pineapples, peaches, first initials. One square read, "Forgive fast." Another, "Hem the hurt." Before the ceremony began, I wandered through them slowly. Each square had a story, and I recognized the nervous stitching in some. I'd seen those girls in our Saturday workshops, huddled around folding tables, giggling over bent needles, learning to knot. A local journalist from the Albany Herald scribbled notes near the punch table. Rutha, standing nearby, dabbed her eyes behind thick tortoiseshell glasses. They rewrote the headline, she whispered, handing me the draft. It read, "From Mockery to Memory." The dress that taught a town. Underneath a photo of Maris and me, our hands overlapping on a bolt of calico. When Maris took the podium, the room hushed. Not the forced silence of discipline, but the reverent kind, the kind that hangs heavy with meaning. She cleared her throat. Last year I mocked something I didn't understand. I saw a dress and thought, how out of touch, how embarrassing. But it turns out that fabric held more than stitches. It held the hands that raised me. She paused. The mic buzzed. My mom wore the original version of this dress in 1980. My dad restored it in 2018. And this version. She twirled gently. This is ours. I call her Naya 2.0. Laughter bubbled softly, then applause. I didn't clap. I couldn't. My hands were frozen, cupping a thimble on my keychain, one that used to sit in Naya's tomato-shaped pin cushion. Its warmth surprised me. Mars continued introducing the recipient of the foundation's first scholarship. She's 14. She made a patchwork skirt from her grandma's curtains. And yes, she's braver than I was at her age. When she called Talia's name, I blinked twice to make sure I'd heard right. The same Talia who'd once giggled during the TikTok dress roast. Now she stepped up proudly in a homemade vest, beaming. Mars handed her the envelope, and they hugged like sisters. After the ceremony, I stayed near the back. Press-mingled families posed. I saw Maris speaking to two younger girls who couldn't have been more than 10. One held up a wobbly needlepoint of a cat. I made it purr, she told her. Maris nodded solemnly. Always trust a cat with opinions. She finally broke from the crowd and found me near the fabric display. In her hands, a square of leftover navy cloth folded neatly. Got room for one more in the quilt, she asked. I nodded. We'll make room. She looked down, touched the thimble on my keychain. You kept it. Didn't know how not to. Then she hugged me. Not a quick teenage side hug, but a full embrace cheek to shoulder. You stitched us back together, she whispered. I didn't answer. Some threads didn't need words. Before we left, she pointed to one final quilt square hung near the exit. White muslin faded script. For the hands that loved me, no attribution, no flair, just truth. We walked out into the Georgia heat. Summer had arrived, humid and buzzing with green life. I carried the leftover scraps under one arm. In the car, she rolled down her window arm, outstretched like a sail. Next year, she said we add a boys' program. There are guys who want to learn too. One told me sewing machines feel like science labs. I smiled. One stitch at a time, huh? She nodded. The thread doesn't end, Dad. It just changes hands. And as we drove past the quilted walls of that little gym, I realized something. Naya hadn't just left a dress. She'd left a pattern. And together we were still sewing. The quilt still hangs in that little gym, faded now, but one square always catches my eye, for the hands that loved me. I ran my fingers over it last Sunday after a workshop, and the thread felt warmer somehow, like time had stitched us whole again. Turns out forgiveness isn't loud. It hums quietly through small axe-burnt pancakes, a shared needle, and old thimble repurposed as a keepsake. Sometimes life frays you thin, so it can teach you to mend from the inside out. If you've ever patched something broken, or someone, you know what I mean. Has life ever handed you a second chance in disguise? I'd love to hear your story, or maybe you're still stitching it.